17. The missionaries spent their first 4 or 5 nights in the marketplace and went into the village in the morning to preach the gospel. They asked who the king of the village was, but the villagers told them that there was no king. "We have men of high title and the chief priests and the elders," they said. It was not very easy getting the men of high title and the elders together after the excitement of the first day. But the missionaries persevered, and in the end, they were received by the rulers of Mabanta. They asked for a plot of land to build their church. Every clan and village had its evil forest. In it were buried all those who died of the really evil diseases, like leprosy and smallpox. It was also the dumping ground for the potent fetishes of great medicine men when they died. An evil forest was, therefore, alive with sinister forces and powers of darkness. It was such a forest that the rulers of Mabanta gave to the missionaries. They did not really want them in their clan, and so they made them that offer which nobody in his right senses would accept. "They want a piece of land to build their shrine," said Uchendu to his peers when they consulted among themselves. "We shall give them a piece of land." He paused, and there was a murmur of surprise and disagreement. "Let us give them a portion of the evil forest. They boast about victory over death. Let us give them a real battlefield in which to show their victory." They laughed and agreed, and sent for the missionaries, whom they had asked to leave them for a while so they might whisper together. They offered them as much of the evil forest as they cared to take, and to their greatest amazement, the missionaries thanked them and burst into song. "They do not understand," said some of the elders, "but they will understand when they go to their plot of land tomorrow morning." And they dispersed. The next morning, the crazy men actually began to clear a part of the forest and to build their house. The inhabitants of Mabanta expected them all to be dead within 4 days. The first day passed, and the second and third and fourth, and none of them died. Everyone was puzzled. And then it became known that the white man's fetish had unbelievable power. It was said that he wore glasses on his eyes so that he could see and talk to evil spirits. Not long after, he won his first 3 converts. Although Nwoye had been attracted to the new faith from the very first day, he kept it a secret. He dared not go too near the missionaries for fear of his father. But whenever they came to preach in the open marketplace or the village playground, Nwoye was there, and he was already beginning to know some of the simple stories they told. "We have now built a church," said Mr. Kiaga, the interpreter, who was now in charge of the infant congregation. The white man had gone back to Umofia, where he built his headquarters, and from where he paid regular visits to Mr. Kiaga's congregation in Mabanta. "We have now built a church," said Mr. Kiaga, "and we want you all to come in every 7th day to worship the true God." On the following Sunday, Nwoye passed and repassed the little red earth and thatch building without summoning enough courage to enter. He heard the voice of singing, and although it came from a handful of men, it was loud and confident. Their church stood on a circular clearing that looked like the open mouth of the evil forest. Was it waiting to snap its teeth together? After passing and repassing by the church, Nwoye returned home. It was well known among the people of Mabanta that their gods and ancestors were sometimes long-suffering and would deliberately allow a man to go on defying them. But even in such cases, they set their limit at 7 market weeks, or 28 days. Beyond that limit, no man was suffered to go, and so excitement mounted on the village as the 7th week approached, since the impudent missionaries built their church in the evil forest. The villagers were so certain about the doom that awaited these men that one or two converts thought it wise to suspend their allegiance to the new faith. At last, the day came by which all the missionaries should have died. But they were still alive, building a new red earth and thatch house for their teacher, Mr. Kiaga. That week, they won a handful more converts, and for the first time, they had a woman. Her name was Naneka, the wife of Amadi, who was a prosperous farmer. She was very heavy with child. Anika had had 4 previous pregnancies and childbirths, but each time she had borne twins, and they had been immediately thrown away. Her husband and his family were already becoming highly critical of such a woman, and were not unduly perturbed when they found she had fled to join the Christians. It was a good riddance. One morning, Okonkwo's cousin, Amikwu, was passing by the church on his way from the neighboring village when he saw Nwoye among the Christians. He was greatly surprised, and when he got home he went straight to Okonkwo's hut and told him what he had seen. The women began to talk excitedly, but Okonkwo sat unmoved. It was late afternoon before Nwoye returned. He went into the obi and saluted his father, but he did not answer. Nwoye turned around to walk into the inner compound when his father, suddenly overcome with fury, sprang to his feet and gripped him by the neck. "Where have you been?" he stammered. Nwoye struggled to free himself from the choking grip. "Answer me," roared Okonkwo, "before I kill you." He seized a heavy stick that lay on the dwarf wall and hit him 2 or 3 savage blows. "Answer me," he roared again. Nwoye stood looking at him and did not say a word. The women were screaming outside, afraid to go in. "Leave that boy at once," said a voice in the outer campground. It was Okonkwo's uncle, Uchendu. "Are you mad?" Okonkwo did not answer, but he left hold of Nwoye, who walked away and never returned. He went back to the church and told Mr. Kiaga that he had decided to go to Umofia, where the white missionary had set up a school to teach young Christians to read and write. Mr. Kiaga's joy was very great. "Blessed is he who forsakes his father and his mother for my sake," he intoned. "Those that hear my words are my father and my mother." Nwoye did not fully understand, but he was happy to leave his father. He would return later to his mother and his brothers and sisters and convert them to the new faith. As Okonkwo sat in his hut that night, gazing into a log fire, he thought over the matter. A sudden fury rose within him, and he felt a strong desire to take up his machete, go to the church, and wipe out the entire vile and miscreant gang. But on further thought, he told himself that Nwoye was not worth fighting for. "Why," he cried in his heart, "should he, Okonkwo of all people, be cursed with such a son?" He saw clearly in it the finger of his personal god or chi. For how else could he explain his great misfortune and exile, and now his despicable son's behavior? Now that he had time to think of it, his son's crime stood out in its stark enormity. To abandon the gods of one's father and go about with a lot of effeminate men clucking like old hens was the very depth of abomination. Suppose when he died, all his male children decided to follow Nwoye's steps and abandon their ancestors. Okonkwo felt a cold shudder run through him at the terrible prospect, like the prospect of annihilation. He saw himself and his fathers crowding round their ancestral shrine, waiting in vain for worship and sacrifice, and finding nothing but ashes of bygone days, and his children the while praying to the white man's God. If such a thing were ever to happen, he, Okonkwo, would wipe them off the face of the earth. Okonkwo was popularly called the Roaring Flame, As he looked into the log of fire, he recalled the name. He was a flaming fire. How then could he have begotten a son like Noye, degenerate and effeminate? Perhaps he was not his son. No, he could not be. His wife had played him false. He would teach her. But Noye resembled his grandfather Unoka, who was Okonkwo's father. He pushed the thought out of his mind. He, Okonkwo, was called a flaming fire. How could he have begotten a woman for a son? At Nowoye's age, Okonkwo had already become famous throughout Omofia for his wrestling and his fearlessness. He sighed heavily, as if in sympathy. The smoldering log also sighed, and immediately Okonkwo's eyes were opened, and he saw the whole matter clearly. Living fire begets cold, impotent ash. He sighed again, deeply.